In this video, we're taking one club, we're going with an 8-iron. We're gonna show you all the different ways you can gap it and learn how far you truly hit this club. Hey everybody, Scott Hogan coming at you. Today we're going to be going deeper in with the Mevo Plus. Again, this is stuff you can do with any launch monitor, but we use the Mevo Plus to try and help you better understand your golf game. Before we do that, make sure you click that subscribe button if you're not a subscriber already. Don't miss out on further videos where we're helping you make this investment worth it, get better, and start learning more about your golf game. So the other day we talked a lot about wedges. We had a wedge out and we were talking about gapping those wedges. That was part one of learning your distances. Now today in part two, we're going to talk about using, something from like a 7-iron or an 8-iron and start learning what you actually hit that club. Because I think a lot of people get a launch monitor and think, all right, I want to learn this one magical swing and learn exactly how far I hit it because I'm going to hit it exactly this distance and all of that. But when you see players and you listen to players talk about how far they actually hit their clubs, you hear a high-level pro, they're going to say, all right, I hit my 7-iron 175 yards, right? But we watch them on TV and they're pulling that club out from 200 yards. Well, that's because there's a lot of different ways you can hit one golf club and cover a lot of different distances. Different conditions are also going to play a part in that, but I think it's very important for players to start understanding all the different ways you can affect the yardage that a golf ball goes, because when you're playing, you want to make sure you guard against some of these ones because there may be trouble or somewhere that you do not want to go that's going to make a bad score. So if you can learn, hey, I can't come up short, so I don't want to hit the ball this certain way, I think you're going to be in really good shape to avoid those big numbers, make more pars, and heck, maybe even have more looks at birdies and make some. So let's get into the bay. Let's start talking about all the different ways we start recording distances with one club to make sure you know how far that club's going to go. So we're here in the bay. We've got the FlightScope Mevo set up. We're going to do this with an 8-iron. We're going to talk about gapping these middle irons, and you can go all the way up even into a 5-iron and a 4-iron. We'll talk about what happens when you start gapping those types of clubs and doing what we're doing right now at those longer irons. But if you remember from the other day, we talked about gapping your wedges. And wedges, we said, all right, you can make a swing and just start adjusting the size of swing, start adjusting ball position, things like that. Now, some of that's going to apply here, but there's a lot of it doesn't, because when you have this club that has a lot less loft on it, it's going to be a lot harder to make like a half swing and have things work out really well. These clubs typically work better if you're going to give it a big run and go ahead and swing at it pretty full. So with that in mind, if we're going to gap our irons and our wedges and stuff, you're going to do them a little bit differently when you get to those irons. So what I like to do is start adjusting where I grip on the golf club. That's the first way I'm going to start adjusting yardages and learning how to hit the ball different yardages with an iron. So what we're going to do here is we're going to let's hit 3 or 4 with that 8-iron, and then let's see what we get on just a full-on shot. All right, so I've got my set of shots here. So, if I had to average out, doing a really, really quick math, I would get right around 160 yards of carry with this 8-iron. That last one's 166. I hit that one particularly well. So, the rest were hovering around that 160-yard carry number, which for me is pretty standard. So, what do I do as I start to build out a matrix for each of my irons? What can I do to change and start filling in gaps? Because, what if I have, 153? What if I have 157? How am I going to make sure I can learn my clubs and what I'm going to do? We'd use the same technique that we did as far as writing down on our matrices. We write down these different variables. So the first thing we're going to do is start choking up on the club. So what we work on is 1/2 inch. Now you can eyeball it as you go, but I'm going to choke up on this 8-iron a ½ inch. Now, one thing I'm going to pay attention to is how this launches and the height. So right now it's 90 feet of height. Launch vertical is 19.5. Let's see what happens. Same swing, swinging at it 100%, and I'm going to choke up about ½ inch. All right, so we just went through, hit those with choking up about ½ inch. So what I've got right now, average was probably around 156 to 157. So choking up just a couple, just a little bit on the grip has brought the club speed down a little bit. The ball surprisingly stayed at that height. I was launching them a little higher, so I'd have to look at why I was doing that. But the distance came down a little bit. Now, again, when I choke up on it, typically you're gonna flatten out the ball flight a little bit. So maybe a little bit of all three of the shots were a little bit higher. So something I would have to pay attention to. But again, information you're taking into about your game and why the ball does what it does. This is where you start learning your yardages and what you're gonna do. So again, if I was at like 160 carry and I'm like, you know what, I wanna get the ball to 160, but I don't want to have it fly all the way back there, risk going over into a hazard. I can take an 8-iron, choke up on it, and I can swing at it full. It's usually a lot better to swing at it full and see what you're going to be able to do with that club and then work from there. I don't like to swing with these longer irons. Again, anything above a wedge, I don't like to go at it where I'm going to swing smoother unless you're doing something really, really crafty with your swing. All right, so that's going to be the first thing we can do. Now, the second thing we can start doing is we can start changing ball position. I want to see what happens as I go into a different spot. All right, so I'm going to go back to full length grip. I'm going to go to a forward ball position. I'm going to hit 2 shots. We'll try to speed up a little bit and see what we get. All right, so by moving my ball position forward, I've probably averaged, again, doing just some quick math on the fly, 154 is right about where we were with that. So ball is higher in the air as you would expect with a ball position that's more forward. Ball's gonna launch higher, so it's gonna start bringing it down. So again, if I'm going to need to bring one in from the sky, try to land it, firm greens, land it right over the top of a bunker, I've got to account that it's actually losing more yardage because you're bringing it in higher. So that 8-iron launch to the sky is going to be about 154. So I definitely wouldn't want to be hitting a 9-iron trying to bring it in from the sky because I wouldn't get there if I had to carry that number. So let's take a look if we go low. I'm going to move the ball back a little bit. So that's moving it back. When I moved the ball back, I actually carried it probably around 164. Now, I do notice the spin on the ball is dropping. So what type of flight can I expect? I can expect one that is going to be a little flatter. It's going to hit. It's going to bounce. Makes sense. It's coming in a little lower. So there we go. But if I need to get a few extra yards out of it, I can actually put the ball back in my stance and see if I can drive it a little bit more back to my target. So you can see how we just worked our way through a matrix there, and we are able to come up with, not only did we learn 1 yardage, hey, our standard swing, 160 yards, just hit an 8-iron that far, but as you get more advanced, and what gets to be a lot of fun is I started to see what happens to the ball when I can try to move it and do these different things. Again, I see a lot of people that'll come to the lesson tee and they say, all right, you want the ball in this part of your stance. And people get frustrated because they'll say like, oh, it depends. It really does. It really does based on what you're trying to do with the ball. Start understanding what variables you can change and affect, and now you're playing the game, playing shots, and you're gonna, I think, have a lot more fun as you're out there on the course. One more thing we can do as we're looking at yardages is we can look at draws, and fades. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit a shot. So all of these were just pretty normal, kind of straight. I kind of pushed the ball on those, so that's basically all it's been. But I'm going to hit one here and fade it on purpose and see what we get. That's a fade. So there I played a fairly sizable fade, and my carry there was 148. Hit it pretty good. Ball's finished right of the target. That's one way I can start adjusting down my swing speed as well. Let's say I want to get the ball. This is something I see a lot too, as people are playing golf. I take people on the course, you know, maybe the pin's like on the right side of the green, and they hit a shot and it starts at the middle of the green and it starts curving its way over there, and then it comes up short and like, oh, I flushed it. It's like, well, if you start getting a ball that's curving away from you, for a righty that's to the right and you're fading it, that knocks off so many yards. It also increases your backspin. That's what we see here. So you're going to get that thing that's just not going to get there. So you can keep that in mind if you're like, hey, I want to attack this flag on the right. You can do that. You better club up though if that's your goal. Let's flip it around. Let's see what happens when we hit a draw. So there we go. We got a little bit of a draw on one. 171.9 is the carry. Hit that one pretty good. Spin went down. So you can hit this shot, hit it farther with this club, but because the spin is down, it's going to release more into the green. So again, something that you can start to play with as you're going through. There's so much information to learn about hitting one golf club. I think it's something that's worth exploring as you go through this and working through. As always, we'd have our card out, charting these yardages. If I hit a shot like this, this is what I get. If I hit a shot like this is what I get. That's also useful information if you're playing a hole and you've got to keep the ball out of trouble. All right, hey, if the ball starts tailing this way, it's going to come up short and it's going to get into the hazard. All right, so I can't hit that shot, or if I'm afraid of it, take more club. These are all things that we do throughout a yardage session. And yeah, you can spend a lot of time on one club. You could spend an entire practice session learning one club. It's worth it though to have better knowledge of what the ball does and how it reacts to different types of swings, flights, ball positions, all of the above. So there you have it. You can see it's not super simple, like, hey, just make the same golf swing over and over again. What we'd rather do is learn all the different ways that you can make a golf ball go. Now, this is something that's a little bit more of maybe an intermediate level thing, but again, I take so many players out onto the golf course, even at beginner levels, and they're shooting 100, 110, and they want to get below that number, and they're starting to hit shots, and you're like, when you pick out a club, they're like, oh, I'm going to do this, and I'm like, there's no way that's going to work. It just won't happen. You have to hit the ball bad for that shot to work out. And it's because usually, hey, the wind's going to move it right, or you tend to hit it right, so you come up a lot shorter than what you are used to. So it's something to pay attention to as you're hitting shots. Not only are you dialing in your yardages with just your stock shot, that one that you're going to hit all the time or when things are perfect, but what are you going to do when things aren't perfect, which is more likely when you're playing golf, and what is that going to do to the yardage? I think it's going to be interesting for you to play the game, hit the ball closer. These are things, if you really want to take your game to that next level, you want to start understanding. So start getting in the habit. If you start writing down 1 or 2 clubs, I think you're going to see that it really does help. Now, one note is when you're doing this, when you get to like a 4 and a 5 iron, a lot of this applies, but you might find that it's a little bit tough to kind of choke up or get good contact, or weirder things start happening. When you start choking up, you might see that ball becoming really, really flat, so the carry goes way, way down. That's stuff to pay attention to as well. Just a note, I usually see that happen when you get around the 5 iron or 4 iron as people are hitting those. So take extra note when you're hitting those clubs doing this. that is how we work to try to really understand our games with these middle irons above the wedges, where the wedges you're working more on feels and half shots. Here we're working on full swings and how many different ways we can influence the ball to get different yardages so we can get it closer to the hole, shoot lower scores. So if you have any questions, comments, please leave those down below. And as always, click that subscribe button if you're not a subscriber. And thank you everybody for watching. We'll catch you in the next video. Peace.